We are going to talk about SNAP, which is what a lot of people are talking about right now. The government's still shut down, unless I've missed the news, which I'm fine with. And it appears, as of right now, that the month's SNAP payments are not going to be going out on schedule. And this is causing pandemonium across the country. Food banks running dry, things like that. People starving in the streets. Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria is what's happening right now. And one of the things I just said is actually important, and that's the idea that people are going to be starving. And so it's important to think like, well, what is the purpose of this program? What is the purpose? If anything, if the government's going to do this, the purpose would be to make sure that people are not starving. People don't starve to death in America, not because they can't find food anyway. People starve to death because they're sick or because of neglect or whatever. They don't starve to death because they literally can't find food. That doesn't happen. So if you want to have a program that's going to keep people from starving, we're going to discuss how to properly have that program. I'm going to try to not do the libertarian thing throughout the entire episode, which is to just constantly say, well, we shouldn't have this program. All that money, all the $100 billion that's getting spent, that shouldn't be getting spent. You should be able to keep that in your wallet. Let's all assume that that is what I believe about this situation, that I would not take your money against your wishes and give it to another person. That is not something I would do, and that's not something I would have the government do either. I do not believe in this type of thing. So let's get that right out front here in the open. And then we're going to do the non-libertarian thing, which is talk about what could be done in what's actually going to be done, if anything, in the real world. How do we move towards a proper, unjust system anyway? So I'm going to try to not do that. And I've been watching so many people's responses to this whole situation, all the comments, of course, and I've had a couple days off. I've spent a lot of time looking around on X and all that. And it's like a lot of people, especially on the right, know that there is some kind of a problem. But what I've noticed is they haven't been able to pinpoint exactly what it is. The problem actually is what I just said, is that we just shouldn't have this program. They'll say things like people on SNAP, they're not working, just being lazy. Most of the people on SNAP are illegal immigrants. See that a lot. Most of it's fraud. See that a lot. Or most of them are people that are using it to buy lobster tails and stuff like that, which is a thing. And I do have some personal stories potentially to tell. But the real answer that they're all dancing around when talking about, like, those are important things, and we should talk about it. There should be job requirements, and there are. I think like 70% of the people that can work are working, or sometimes at least working or looking for work. I don't know exactly how that number breaks down. Some of these things are problems. As far as illegal immigrants, we'll talk about that one. The fraud numbers, according to the government, are pretty low. I've seen, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen, the fraud that does occur. Maybe some of you guys have gone to a grocery store before and asked someone if they could sell you their SNAP card, their EBT card, and you might get a good deal on it too. There could be a couple $100 on the card, and you might have to pay them like $100 for it, and you get a good deal. But it turns out they weren't needing that money to buy groceries. So there is fraud, and I don't know exactly how much of that stuff is caught. But like the answer that they're all kind of dancing around and not able to pinpoint really is that it's immoral to take people's hard-earned money. You take that out of someone's paycheck, and then you give it to another person. It's just an immoral thing to do, and that's why you see all these things. You're like, that's unfair. That's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. And it all boils down to the entire system is immoral. If it were a just world or just society, churches and voluntary organizations and all those people would be collecting money or collecting food to feed people. And that's how you would That's how you would take care of people. But we all can kind of feel that that's not the situation that we're in. Those things still do exist. People still do collect a lot of food for food pantries and money for organizations and things like that. It still happens. Even though we spend $100 billion a year on SNAP. But the SNAP program, like all the other government programs, was never supposed to be this big, if you can imagine such a thing. It was never supposed to be this big. When the program started the second time, they had it during the Great Depression, and then actually kind of ended it for a bit, and then it got started back up with the war on poverty. When it first started, it was 2 to 4% of the country were on SNAP, and that was at a time where the poverty rate was actually a little bit higher than it is right now, if not just say the same, because the poverty rates come up a little bit since the pandemic and all that. But it was 2 to 4% of the population. And right now it's over 12% of the population. So 10% of America's $1 trillion of food expenditures on groceries comes from SNAP. It's a really big program. And food prices could go down if you were to say get rid of SNAP on some items. Food prices could come down. You gotta remember, people still would buy food. They would just likely be forced into a situation where they didn't buy other things and they instead bought food because you absolutely have to have food. The prices would come down some because you're not giving people a card with money on it to go grocery shopping, and they're not thinking so much about prices, not as much as they would be. So it would come down just a little bit. But today we have to fix, I want to try and fix or try and address a problem. And the problem is, how the heck are we spending so much money on this program? $100.3 billion in 2024. That's quite a lot of money. This program started off in 1970 spending like $3 or $4 billion, and that's in inflation adjusted numbers. It's inflation adjusted. That's a pretty big jump. Like, why? How are we paying so much? Inflation adjusted, once again, at the time that we started it, we were paying something like $55 per person per month. That's what they were getting to spend on groceries. That's not $55 in 1970 money. That's $55 in 2024 money that they were getting to spend on groceries. Now it's $190. It's a big jump in money per person. It's not just a massive jump in the amount of people that are on it or the percentage of the population that's on it. It's also a big jump in the amount of money that goes out per person to buy these groceries. So how did we get to this point? I want you to keep this Thomas Sowell quote in mind while we go through some of this stuff. It's not going to apply to every single thing we're about to go through, but keep it in mind. It popped in my head last night, and it just kind of, as I see people posting about welfare and taking care of people, and yes, we should all chip in and buy people's groceries, stuff like that. Thomas Sowell, a good quote, said, we seem to be getting closer and closer to a situation where nobody is responsible for what they did, but we are all responsible for what somebody else did. You're not responsible for you, but all of us are responsible for you. How can I not have responsibility for the things that I do, the decisions I've made in my life, but I carry responsibility for other people and the things they've done in their lives, or they all carry responsibility for me, but not for themselves? That's sort of weird. Just saying, it's a little bit weird. I'm going to play this news clip from CBS. It's been making the rounds. I've seen a few people play it already, but it sort of gets the situation in the context. What are we talking about here? What are the feelings? What are the thoughts? What kind of situation are we in?
Trump administration says it will not use emergency funds to pay for federal food benefits with a fast approaching deadline. CBS's Christina Fan is in New York with details on that. Christina.
Well, Jerika, 1 in 8 Americans rely on SNAP benefits, and tonight there is mounting worry for them. They might not be able to afford food with money running out 1 week from today.
I think people are starting to panic.
Food banks around the country are flashing warning signs.
We've been having about 7 to 10 new people a day this week.
Look at that. That was full this morning.
The pantry at Calvary Episcopal Church in Kentucky ran out of food for the first time in its 43-year history.
We feel like this is the tip of the iceberg.
Members of the California National Guard are now deployed to help food banks in the state. In Massachusetts, 16% of residents rely on SNAP benefits, which provide an average of $187 a month, or about $6 a day. Democratic Governor Maura Healey holds President Trump responsible.
Leadership is a choice. And sadly, President Trump has chosen to take away food from people all around this country.
Aboard Air Force One, President Trump told reporters he's not to blame.
I have to stop it real quick in this video. Good point by Clark in the group. Not everyone that uses this program relies on it for all their food. People do use it, and then you spend that extra money elsewhere. But the number of people who are just going to be on the streets starving and begging for food would be an extremely small percentage of that. People would have to make choices. I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, I grew up pretty poor during the week. It was between 2 households. So I was the son of a single mother who was putting herself through college to become a school teacher during the week, and then the son of a farmer on the weekends. And so during the week, I was pretty poor overall. And I get it. I've seen these things. People trying, to pick themselves up by their bootstraps, and you still have a hard time paying your bills no matter what you do, no matter how cheap the food is that you're eating. There's still food that I won't eat because it gives me bad memories. There's a couple things I won't eat because it gives me bad memories. And I get it. We'd drive in a junker car that would break down and have to get rides from people when the car would break down. Living in a trailer park. Yeah. Even happened to white people back in that time. So I get that, but we actually weren't on food stamps, and we still found a way to not starve to death the entire time. If anything, I was a little chunky growing up. So the percentage is pretty small. And then the way that the governor just sort of phrased what Trump is doing here, taking food away from people. You still go get food. You're not banning people from getting food. It might take a bit for people to make adjustments in their budgets to be able to get that, or to make adjustments in the kind of food that they buy. We're going to talk about all that, but that's not exactly what's happening. All right, here's a little bit more.
I'm going to let some other people talk. I'll have a comment on that later, but the Democrats are stopping it.
The sudden loss in federal food aid will ripple beyond homes into stores and businesses. Every dollar in SNAP benefits generates $1.54 in economic activity.
Quite a bit of our sales come from EBT recipients. Right now, it's making up about 10 to 15% of our total sales a month.
And by the way, and don't worry, we're going to talk about the whole every dollar spent generates $1.54 in economic activity, because that's a thing people are talking about. It's not true, by the way. And she said, what'd she just say, 15, 20% of our sales come from EBT. Those people, if there's anything they're still going to buy out of all the things that they pay for, food is going to be one of them. You might lose some of your sales. That's true. You might lose some of your sales, but people are still going to buy food. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, food prices will plummet if we get rid of SNAP. somewhat on some foods, but people will just use money that they're spending on other things to still buy food because that's still something that they have to buy. Now they won't have the other people's money to go do it, and they might be more cost conscious when doing so. So it'll have less of an inflationary effect on the food price, and it could come down a little bit at first. Yeah, that's let's move on to the next thing here. So I can tell I'm already going pretty long-winded. 25 states have filed lawsuits trying to get Trump to pay the monies. I want to get to the every dollar in benefits. This screenshot was going around from CNN, and it's got myths and facts about SNAP benefits. Here's a myth. People who get SNAP don't work. Fact, most SNAP participants who can work do. That is statistically accurate, by the way. I've spent 3 days reading everything there is to read about SNAP. You could ask me I couldn't put everything in this show, but if you guys want to ask me something about SNAP, go ahead and ask me. I'll let you know. Myth: SNAP drains the economy. Fact: SNAP boosts the economy. Each dollar in benefits during a downturn raises GDP by $1.54. Here's another myth. Let's just read what these are. It might be beneficial. SNAP benefits go to undocumented immigrants. The fact says undocumented immigrants are ineligible. The program is limited to U.S. citizens, certain lawfully present immigrants. That is partially true and partially false. We will talk about that as well in this show. Illegal immigrants cannot get SNAP benefits, but if they have children that are born in the U.S. who are U.S. citizens until that's changed, they are U.S. citizens, they are eligible for SNAP. Now, it's prorated to where the benefits are only for the kids. They don't count the illegal immigrant parents in the amount of money that they give to people. It's only for the kids, but that's money for those kids that those illegal immigrant parents are not having to spend out of their own pockets. And so, in effect, there is a benefit going to illegal immigrants. They just don't get it like everyone else. So, this says, myth: SNAP is rife with fraud. Fact: over the past 15 years, SNAP fraud has fallen from 4% to 1%. That's what the stats say. I highly doubt they catch all of it. It would be tough to catch all of it. This does not include WIC. Question in the group. This is just SNAP. I believe, now I didn't read up on WIC. I think WIC goes to like anyone. Pretty sure. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. That's not going to be part of the show. Maybe someone else can look that up for me. I was reading about WIC, and there's another one called TANF, as I call it. TANF does not go to illegal immigrants. I don't remember WIC specifically. Let's talk about the dollar. Tim Walz posted out. Every $1 invested in SNAP generates $1.80 in economic activity. Wow, it's gotten better since the official government studies on the matter. He says it's not about the money. Trump just wants Americans to go hungry. Now, as many people have pointed out, if this were true, then we just need to give out more SNAP benefit. In fact, everyone should get an EBT card. And we could just double and double and double we'll just keep doubling the economy. It's just going to be the world's greatest and best economy that you've ever seen. Why wouldn't you? Every dollar you spend generates $1.80 in economic activity. And then the government gets to tax that a little bit, that economic activity. And give everyone a SNAP card, give everyone an EBT card. This is how we're going to get out of the debt, actually. I think we'll just give out like $34 trillion in SNAP cards. That should fix the problem. I don't know why we're all so concerned about this whole debt thing. So this goes to, I went to the USDA for this. Here's what they found. This is that whole, Tim Walz says $1.80. The actual stat, which was posted by CNN, from this is $1.54. So the GDP multiplier, that's what they call it, is 1.5 for the GDP. So every $1,000 spent, there's an additional $538 for the GDP. But there's a problem when looking at this. First off, there's a thing in this screenshot from CNN that people should notice. It says each dollar in benefits during a downturn raises GDP by $1.54. Now, why did they put during a downturn in that? Because that's what the studies show. The study that gives us that $1.54 number is based on that SNAP benefit, that SNAP boost, that extra dollar for SNAP being generated from debt or deficits. Why is that important? It's generated from debt or deficits, not an extra dollar of taxation. So what they show is during a downturn, when we are typically printing money or borrowing more money, things like that, each dollar boost for SNAP generates more economic activity. But what the study does not address, and I went through the study and then I went through another one that addresses what this study did not address. How are you going to pay back that dollar? You had to borrow it or you had to print it in this study. If you printed it, you're going to cause inflation. If you borrowed it, you're going to have to pay back that debt somehow. How are you going to pay back that debt? You're either going to tax it back out of the economy or you're going to print it, which is going to cause inflation. And you're going to pay back that debt, by the way, with interest also. So how would it be possible that dollar that we took out in debt is going to generate more economic activity? You're actually going to make money off of that dollar. They don't account for where the dollar came from. It's a dollar that came out of thin air. It did not exist before, and now this dollar exists. And then you give it to someone and they go and spend it, and then that person can use that to buy supplies, and they can use that to buy more stuff for their store, and they can hire workers, and those workers can go out and do things in the economy too, and the places they buy things from can go and hire more people and all that. And so that's how it generates all of this economic activity. But they assume the dollar was just created out of thin air and that it's never going to need paid back. That's how you get that number. When you actually account for not during the downturn, not deficit, but you actually are taxing that. What happens when you tax the dollar? I mean, this should be pretty easy for people to realize. Where'd you get the dollar that's going to generate this economic activity? You took it from the economy, where it was also going to be spent in places that would generate economic activity. The dollar was already in the economy. Someone was going to use it. You took it out of the economy, took a little cut for yourself for doing administration, You're a public servant, but you can't serve for free, So you took a little bit off the top. I think that number is about 7% is the administrative costs. So then you put that into the economy. But it was already in the economy. You took your cut and you put it out there again in the economy. Well, other studies have actually found that actually ended up being a net negative for the economy. Not a lot of a negative, but it's not a 1.5 multiplier. It's very different from a 1.5 multiplier. Studies who took into account the fact that it was taken from the economy in the first place says this is a slight loss for the economy, but ultimately an inconsequential 0.02% of GDP, which is best explained by the distortionary effects of the U.S. tax system, meaning that you took it from other people who were also going to spend it. Okay, so this whole thing like, oh, we got to do SNAP because every time we spend money, it makes the entire economy better. Nope. Sounds like some Keynesian BS, if you ask me. Okay. All right. Now to something that you guys might not like, if you're more right-wing coded. This clip from Newsmax has been going around, and it just drove me nuts, man. Let me tell you what. It drove me nuts. I'm going to play it for you. And once again, like, they're going to talk a lot about immigrants, illegal immigrants, getting SNAP benefits. That's something we should talk about. All right. Now, the benefits themselves actually go to the children of illegal immigrants, and then they go to refugees and asylees. Those are the people who actually qualify for the SNAP benefits, although not all of them anymore after the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill. That is different now. But thanks to the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, we actually have numbers on how many people are receiving those SNAP benefits, because they had to figure that out to figure out how much money they were going to save. So I'm able to refer to the literature on the One Big Beautiful Bill to tell you this is how many people they say cutting out asylees or refugees. This is how many people are going to be cut out of this program. So it gives us a number on that. As I said at the beginning, people want to find like a cause for this. What is the problem? Why are we spending so much money? It must be illegal immigrants. And we can talk about that. The problem I have with that is that given all the numbers I've been able to find, and especially from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and all the other government numbers, all the numbers I'm able to find, if you were to fight the good fight to cut out every single one of these people, you're going to have some effect on the amount that we spend on SNAP, but it's not going to be enough to fix anything. It's like you're going to point at this group as the problem, and I don't think illegal immigrants should be getting taxpayer money either. And I'm with you. I agree with you on that. But you're going to point to this as the problem. This must be the problem. And then you're going to fight really hard to fix that. And at the end of the day, you're like, what the heck? I thought we solved the problem. It turns out we still have a massive issue here. It's because it was not as big of a problem as you said it was. It's not as big of a percentage as you said it was. So that's why I got to pick apart stuff like this. Here is this guy on Newsmax.
There are 42 million people in this country that need food stamps on a weekly basis. And we're saying people deliberately instead of Americans, because most of the people that are on food stamps aren't even from this country. 45% of Afghanistan immigrants are on food stamps. 42% of Somali immigrants, 34% of every immigrant from Iraq, 23% of Haitians, 59% of all illegal aliens are collecting food stamps, meaning that most of the people getting food stamps from the U.S. government and the U.S. taxpayer are not even Americans. Think about that. And we didn't know about any of this before the government shutdown started, but thanks to Democrats, we can confirm tonight that millions of Joe Biden illegal aliens, people who crossed the border when Joe was president.
So let's go back to some of the numbers that this guy just said. First off, he's talking about food stamps by ethnicity. And he says a couple times in this clip that most of the people getting this aren't even Americans. And he shows Afghan, Somali, Iraqi, Haitian, and the Afghan population does seem to be the biggest by population that get these programs. The reason being a lot of those people are refugees and asylum seekers. So when he talks about these numbers right here, he is mainly talking about refugees and asylum seekers. And while it is a large portion of those populations, it's not a large portion of the people who get SNAP. So we got 43 million people getting SNAP. If you total up all the refugees and asylum seekers and some other immigrants, I don't remember exactly who was in that, like the high end of that number is less than 2 million. Less than 2 million people of the 43 million that are getting SNAP on a monthly basis. And then you look at the numbers and it's like, oh, okay, well, 45% of those people are getting SNAP benefits or welfare benefits or whatever the case may be. And so then it's less than half of the high end being 2 million. And so then you're at 1 million, and it's not even half of that. It's actually less than half of that when you look into it. And so at the end of the day, you're talking about like in the hundreds of thousands of people. And he's using a number that when you write it down on paper and you actually go through it and you say, okay, this is how many people get it. This is how many of those people actually qualify that are refugees, asylum seekers, all those. Break that down into Afghan, Somali, Iraqi, Haitian. That's how many of these people are. And then it's less than half of those people right there. You come out to a number that's somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of people. And so this is where I'm saying people are noticing the problem. They just can't pinpoint what it actually is. And this, while it might be a problem and we might not like it, you get rid of this and you're not even going to see a difference in the number of the budget. It's not enough people to actually make the difference that we need to make. I mean, the what we spend on SNAP has gone up 66% since 2019. It's gone up 66% since 2019, pre-pandemic era. And then it exploded during the pandemic, and then we've slowly worked our way back down a little bit, just in time for whatever the next thing is going to be. That's going to explode it again, our boom and bust cycle that we're on. And then he says this other thing.
59% of all illegal aliens are collecting food stamps.
That's also just objectively not true. I'm going to go to the actual numbers on this, where he got the 59%. All right. Let's see. This is just another example of someone not knowing statistics very well. This person says we can cut 81% of EBT by cutting out all of these groups that aren't Americans, and that's not the case. 89% of the people that receive SNAP were born in America. Born in America. 10.6% are foreign-born people. Now, of the 89.4%, some of those people are children of illegal immigrants that are technically U.S. citizens. Okay? But 89.4% of the people were born in the USA. All right? So you're not going to fix that problem. And it's definitely not 81% of the people can get cut out. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they estimated that restricting SNAP to citizens, permanent residents, and Haitian or Cuban entrants, and excluding refugees and asylum seekers would cut out, get this, so if you cut out refugees and asylum seekers, that would cut out 120,000 to 250,000 people. That is not 81% of the program at all. No, it's mostly Americans that are getting this. The 59% number. This is another example of someone not taking one entry-level statistics class. And I don't expect everyone to know all of these things or to know how to read charts and graphs or statistics. That's fine that people can't do that. I don't want to make fun of them for just making massive statistical errors. It's not like everyday people are just supposed to walk around thinking about, 59% of what? Thinking about stats all the time. But what I do expect is that if you don't know how to do that, you don't go and post about it. And that's where the problem comes. The 59% number is not from SNAP that guy just quoted. The 59% is from CIS.org, and that is any welfare. That includes SNAP, but it is all forms of welfare. And that is not 59% of welfare goes to illegal immigrants or goes to illegal-headed households, as the 59% number says. It's 59% of illegal-headed households receive some kind of welfare benefit. Now, there's a reason that CIS.org put illegal-headed households and not the individuals, like illegal immigrants. It would not be as impressive of a stat to show people. But when you put households, that can include U.S.-born children, or it can include people in your household that are not illegal immigrants. Say that you are a U.S. citizen that is married to an illegal immigrant. Your household could be an illegal-headed household. Or your kids are born here, you have an illegal-headed household. but your U.S. born children or your U.S. citizen wife can still qualify for welfare benefits. So that's why they put households on here. And this is actually broken down by CIS. And it turns out that the biggest portion, when they say that 59% of those households receive any kind of welfare, not food stamps, not SNAP, any kind of welfare, in that stat, it is 17% of those households receive SNAP, not 59%. It's 17% of illegal-headed households, okay? Probably because they have kids that are U.S. born. The biggest portion actually is Medicaid and then school lunches. And that is included in any form of welfare. So once again, if we don't talk about the right problems and how we can get to big enough chunks of this thing, then we don't actually solve the problem. We might get people off of it that don't need to be on it, but you're not going to fix the problem of the financial destruction of America by cutting a couple 100,000 people out of these benefits. We should, if they should be cut out of it, sure. But you're not, don't act like you're like, oh, look, we fixed the deficit. No, that's not what's happening. It's really not what's happening at all. What we actually find here is that total participants, let's see, refugee or other non-citizen, 1.8 million for SNAP, and that's out of the 40 to 43 million. And of course, the biggest portion of people taking SNAP, it's in the data, pretty easy to see, are white people and African-American people. That's what the data says. White and black people make up well over half of the people that take SNAP. All right. So we can talk about the illegal immigrants and stuff. I'm not going to pretend like that's going to solve the problem like some people want to. Back to our problem. How the heck are we spending $100 billion a year on SNAP when we used to spend like $5 billion a year on SNAP, inflation adjusted? It's pretty crazy. How did we used to spend like $55 per person in 1970 on SNAP, and now we're spending $190 per person, inflation adjusted, on SNAP? That's just growth of a government program there if I ever saw it. So I got to figure out, now, this is me going through the numbers trying to figure out how the heck this happened. So like, well, food inflation. There's been a lot of inflation, even though those numbers were inflation adjusted, but whatever. Food inflation is roughly around 30% since 2019. Right around 30%. So like you could say, well, the amount in 2019 dollars that we were spending per person on SNAP, if it were to have gone up by 30%, then that would kind of make a little bit of sense because it's keeping up with the rate of inflation, right? That's an inflation adjusted number. I don't think there were mass amounts of people starving to death on the streets in America in 2019. People were finding a way to get by, but food at home prices increased by 30%. So you could say, well, we'll take the amount we were spending per person on SNAP in 2019 and increase that by 30%. Are we spending that number? No. We've increased that number by about 46%. Not 30, about 46 per person. And then we've added way more people. It's pretty crazy, actually. The numbers, according to 2019 numbers, is something like 6 or 7 million people have been added since then. And it's crazy when you think about the fact that since 2019, according to the Census Bureau, the population has gone up by about 14 million people. So we added like 14 million people. Now that's not counting, you know who, from south of the border, probably. Might be some estimates in there. Sure. Some estimates are in there. It's probably not counting everyone. But officially, we've added like 14 million people in population, and almost half of that population growth has also gone on to SNAP. That's a lot. That's too many. and we've increased the number we pay per person more than the rate of inflation, as if people were just starving to death on the street in year of our Lord 2019. I was here in 2019. We were doing the show in 2019, and we weren't talking about people starving to death on the street in 2019. We were not talking about that at all. I don't think I was ignoring stories about that. That's just not what was happening. Let's see. But what did happen? This is interesting. This actually right here accounts for 25% of the increase in the monthly payments for families of 4 on SNAP. This accounts for 25%. They did this thing in 2021, the Biden administration did, and increased the benefits. There's something they use called the Thrifty Food Plan. And they've been doing it since like the 70s. They're essentially trying to find like what is the basket of goods that a family of 4, they work the whole thing out. Here's how old the people are. Here's how old the 2 kids are. And like what food do they need to survive on? How much would that cost? And it's going to be cheaper options for that food. How much would that cost? Okay, well, here's what that is. And that's what we think people should be getting for your typical family of 4 in America. To be able to buy this basket of goods that we've decided is the thing. And so this is before Make America Healthy Again. But in 2021, they decided that people needed healthier options. I agree. People need healthy options. They decided people needed healthier options for food. All right. A quarter of their cart needed to be vegetables. A quarter of their cart needed to be some kind of high protein foods. 14% of it needed to be fruits. 14% needed to be dairy. 16% needed to be grains. And it said, this is the cart that we want to pay for. Now, since we put a ton of fruits and vegetables in this thing, and this is fresh produce that we're adding in this thing, and then a lot of meats in here, people got to get their meats. Meats are getting expensive too. It turns out to have this healthy basket of groceries, it costs about 25% more than what we're making sure people get for a family of 4. So they increased that number from around $600 to $835 per month for a family of 4 because it's healthier. Now, the issue I have with deciding to do the healthier thing is that how do you know people are buying healthy food? Are you making sure that that is the percentage allotment of what's going into their cart when they go and buy the food? No, they're still able to buy like everything that you can find at a grocery store. We'll talk about that here in a second. This chart's been going around and compares what people who are not using SNAP to people who are using SNAP. What is their percentage of household food expenditures going towards? So it turns out people on SNAP buy more meat, poultry, and seafood, which makes sense to me because I literally 2021, 2022, I stopped buying steak. I used to buy some steaks and make them. I'm like, I'm not paying that much for steak. I'm just not going to do it. My brain is not adjusted to these prices. I could pay for it, but I don't feel right doing it. Like that's per meal. You're telling me I'm going to spend $15 on this meal at home this one time, and then I got to do it all again the next day? That's crazy. No way I'm going to do that. That's ridiculous. Turns out people on SNAP buy more meat, poultry, and seafood. They buy more sweetened beverages, frozen food, prepared desserts, salty snacks, prepared foods. It's like you go in there and you already got prepared food at the grocery store, you can walk home with, and more sugar, literal sugar, than people who are not on SNAP. I'm not just saying they're all buying junk food and all that. That's where it's all going. The numbers are not that much different when it comes to the junk food. But they're buying more than people who are not on SNAP of those things. Desserts, prepared food, sweetened beverages, salty snacks, sugar, literal sugar. I just thought that was kind of funny. And meat. They're buying less bread, fruit, milk, eggs, nuts, and vegetables than people who are not on SNAP. I thought that was interesting once I sat here and stared at this little chart here for a bit. So even though you come up with this thrifty food plan in 2021 that says we need people to eat healthier food is more expensive, here's the percentages of the healthy food we think should be in their cart, and it turns out it costs more money for them to buy that food, 25% more money than what we were paying out previously. So we're going to make sure they have enough money to buy all of this healthy food. When you look at the numbers, that's not what's happening. It turns out people just make different choices. They don't, just because there's more money in there now doesn't mean they're like, oh yeah, awesome. I'd love almonds. I've been wanting almonds this whole time, and now I can finally get them because of this 25% bump in the pay. That's not what happened at all, from what I can tell anyway. And then we get into things that are eligible. Some of these things actually bother me. Some of them are funny. The lobster tail thing has been going around quite a bit. This person, Amy Nixon, says, why are tax dollars subsidizing lobster for SNAP recipients? You see this lobster tail on Amazon's website is SNAP eligible. And this is, those are tiny lobster tails, by the way. They're small. $10, 4 tails. They're pretty small. You're going to eat a couple of those guys at least, plus some other food. This person says because lobster tails are food. Then they say in our next lesson, we'll cover where babies come from. I got 1 million views. That one retweet of that post right there got 1 million views. There you go. It is a fact that lobster tails are food, and they're actually pretty healthy food from what I can tell. I'll tell you my thoughts on this here in a bit. This person says, when I go to the store and see them advertising big tubs of chocolate chip cookies as EBT eligible, it makes me not care about it getting shut down. In response to that, says, dudes will get on here and be like, quote, poor kids don't deserve to have a cookie, and think they're the good guys. Okay, I'm going to store that response in my mind. This one I actually thought was funny. C3 on X posts out the Grey Poupon Dijon mustard being eligible for EBT. Sure. Do you need Dijon mustard? Maybe not. Maybe not specifically. Do you need Dijon mustard? Grey Poupon, they had like one of the better advertising campaigns I think anyone's ever had. And it was like this guy in a limo with Grey Poupon. It's like, excuse me, sir, do you have any Grey Poupon? And it made everyone think that Grey Poupon is like the super fancy, expensive mustard. When in all reality, it's a pretty cheap price for Dijon mustard. There's a lot fancier mustards out there. I just want to point out that Grey Poupon did a great job advertising back in the early 2000s or whenever it was that they were advertising that. This one made me upset because I love Celsius. Someone tell me why a 12-pack of energy drink, it's not just Celsius. Celsius is a little bit more expensive. Someone tell me why a 12-pack of Red Bull, Monster, Celsius, whatever, are eligible on SNAP. $21 for this 12-pack of Celsius. That works out to a pretty good price. It's better than buying it at a gas station or something like that. I get it. But once again, when you talk about taking away SNAP or you talk about delaying the payment for a bit, people are talking about how there's going to be starving people and they have to go to food banks to get their food. And you see all sorts of iterations of that idea out there. And at the end of the day, if we're going to have a program like this, it needs to be to prevent people from starving. I'm a libertarian. I would not ask the government to put a gun to someone's head, so they put money into a pot of money and then give it to someone else. But if we are going to have this program, the purpose should be to make sure that people are not starving. Not that they're all hopped up on caffeine and niacin and B vitamins or what, I don't know what's in Celsius. Why is that EBT eligible? What does that have to do with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program? Someone answer that for me, please. I put one other one in here, which you might not agree with. This one actually kind of made me mad. It only made me mad because I love beef jerky. Love beef jerky. Who doesn't like beef jerky? You guys know the problem with beef jerky? It's so freaking expensive. And so how often do I buy beef jerky, which I love, which I will sit here and eat an entire bag of if it were sitting right there in front of me? Never is the answer. It has been years of walking past that delicious looking bag of Jack Links because when I saw the price tag, I was like, no, I got better stuff to spend my money on. You know how many other things I could get for the freaking $15 that's going to cost me to get that beef jerky? I could get a lot of other stuff for that money. And so I decide that there are better uses of my money. And this one, I get it. Beef jerky has probably got some good stuff for you and all that. It's meat, healthier or whatever. But that kind of made me mad. Just kind of did, because I like it and I never buy it. I could buy it. I just don't, because it seems like a waste of my money. But I'm more frugal when I'm spending my own money on myself, as everyone is. So now what? To the problem here. As I run through all of this information. When it comes to the stuff like the different items you can buy. The one about the cookies was a good example. This person essentially says what we're saying is poor kids don't deserve to have a cookie. Deserve. Most people don't deserve to have a cookie. And now I'm going to say something that's going to sound kind of mean. I don't mean it mean, and I mentioned earlier in the show, I grew up pretty poor, and I get it, okay? I do. And I'm sorry that people are in that position. I am. I really am. But it's not about what you deserve to eat. People act like the point of the program is so people can go out grocery shopping and be like everybody else. And the meanest thing I'll say is you're not like everybody else. The other people that are in there buying things, they're using their own money that they got from their paycheck. And it's coming out of other things that they could be buying. And they're making their own decisions to buy those things. You're going in there with other people's money on a program that is supposed to keep you from starving in America and buying things that I won't even buy because it's a bad use of my money. Things that I want. Lobster tails, beef jerky, a whole case of Celsius. That sounds like a fun Tuesday night to me. But I don't go buy those things because it's a bad use of my money, and you can go in there and buy those things with other people's money. But it's not about what you deserve. We don't all get what we deserve. As Milton Friedman would say, thank God we don't get what we deserve, right? Know what I mean? You're not there to be like everyone else because you're there shopping with other people's money to get groceries so your family doesn't starve or so you don't starve. Because for whatever reason, and I'm not even saying it's your fault, for whatever reason, you are not making enough money to pay all of your bills and then to be able to buy groceries afterwards. And that sucks. But it doesn't mean you get to go in there and shop just like everybody else. That is not fair. It's especially not fair for you to go in there and get things that people shopping on their own money don't go and buy. Okay? If you can buy things like lobster or things like dessert with EBT, then you're not starving. You're just not. And you're not close to starving. Because that was a total of 4 ounces of lobster in that picture. And it's not gonna do it. If you're going to buy a whole container of cookies, you're not starving. It's great that your kids can have cookies and maybe use other money for cookies or whatever. But what it tells me when I see this is that there's too much money going to everyone on this program. Okay, imagine if you were going. Imagine you're going shopping. Someone else is taking you shopping. You don't have the money to buy groceries, but you need some food, and so someone else is going to pay for the bill when you get done. Go shopping with you. Everyone listening, just imagine that you're in that position. It reminds me, one time the terrible, don't ever do this, and she should not have done it, but my mom picked up a homeless person, put them in her car. She didn't pick them up. They got up and they got in her car, and she took them grocery shopping because that's the kind of person she is. On Thanksgiving and Christmas, so we know where they are. We took plates of food from what we cooked and took it over there to the homeless people so they could have turkey and stuffing and all that kind of stuff on I think it was Christmas. And we put some cash in there for them too because it was Christmas. When she took the person shopping, first off, they were like crying during the process and crying when they left the store. Maybe because someone was doing something so nice for them, and maybe partially because they felt bad. Maybe they felt some shame in it or something like that. Anytime my mom was like, "Do you need this?" and they're like, "No, no, no," and she's like, "Oh, just get that. If you want that, let's get that." But that whole idea of like someone's taking you shopping and they're paying the bill at the end of the day. Are you telling me you're going to walk through the aisles with that person, pushing a cart, and you're going to grab lobster tails and big old thing of cookies and some Oreos and a thing of energy drinks? Is that really what you would do if that person were standing next to you? Because that's the situation that you're in if you're taking the SNAP money. The person's not there next to you, but a whole bunch of people have taken money out of their paychecks to give you that money so you can go shopping. It is the same thing, except for they're not there for you to feel the shame in doing it. Eventually, some of these people end up feeling entitlement. Maybe those videos will be there for tomorrow's show. In my opinion, you would try to be as cheap as you could while getting the things that you need. If you're looking at soups, maybe you would buy the off-brand soups. If you're, whatever the thing is. I think that that's one of the solutions here, and I think it's a very big, a very easy solution. There are so many things that are SNAP eligible, that are EBT eligible, that just should not be eligible. As taxpayers who are forcefully having our money taken to give to other people so they can go grocery shopping, we should all at least be able to agree that the amount of things that you can buy with that money should be severely limited. And since when these programs are paused for a bit or halted or delayed or whatever, everyone's like, oh, these people are going to starve. Well, then that means it should be food that makes sure that your family doesn't starve. And that should be the purpose of the program. Which means you should be able to cut that down to whatever foods those are. It could be fruits and vegetables, stuff like that. Whatever. Cereal, soups, rice, beans. I'm not saying that, there's just going to be an EBT store that just sells rice and beans or something like that. It's not what I'm saying. But honestly, freaking steaks shouldn't be on there. Ribeyes should not be on there. They shouldn't. Ground beef could be on there. Chicken breasts, stuff like that, whatever. But no, this is to make sure that your family doesn't starve. It's not to make sure that you feel like everyone else when you go to the grocery store, because you're not like everyone else. All those other people are using their own money out of their own paychecks. You are forcing someone else to buy your groceries so your family doesn't starve. It's one of the biggest things when we get back to the issue of how is it that we were paying so much more money per person than we used to. One thing, they changed what they said people were going to buy. It'd be one thing if they limited EBT to only those things, but they didn't. They increased the money so people could buy those fresh fruits and produce and all that kind of stuff, but you're still able to buy everything else. And that shouldn't be the case. It should be bare necessities, decent food, sure, but I'm sorry, it should not be like a comfortable lifestyle getting all the stuff that everyone else is getting when they're at the grocery store. It shouldn't. Some of the things, maybe it'll be a little bit more incentive for you to get off the program. That'd be a big cut to it. You should be able to take the amount we were paying in 2019 at least and adjust that for inflation and cut that down to that's what the average amount per person is, okay? There's another thing that they do. This is a weird one. I'd never really thought about this. In the 70s, when they started this program, another reason that so few people were on it there in the first decade or so was because they weren't doing much outreach. In fact, in the 70s, only between 30 and 50% of the people that were eligible for the program were actually on the program. And so what they decided to do, what any good government agency or someone running the program does, they said, well, we need to justify our existence. And so they made an effort to go out there and find every single person that was possibly eligible for this program and get them signed up for it and send them the stamps and eventually send them the EBT card. I don't think they should do that. Maybe people can know that it exists, but I don't think the government should be making an effort to go out there and sign up people to use other people's money. If the program is so necessary that people would starve without it, why do you have to spend so much money and time doing outreach, trying to get people to sign up for it? It sort of feel like it would advertise itself. But what they found is that only half the population that was eligible was signing up for it, and so they had to go out and find the people and get them signed up and get their address and send them the stamps so they could justify their budgets and their jobs. And maybe some of them wanted to help people too, sure. So it used to be 30 to 50% in the 70s, now it's 90% of the people that are eligible. I'm not saying to cut all of them out. I'm saying stop going out there and seeking out people whose finances might fit the criteria and trying to get them to sign up for the program. If they decide they need it, then they can go and do it, but stop doing the outreach. Please, please take someone else's money. Please. They can come to you and ask for the thing, okay? No one above the federal poverty line should qualify for this. It seems like a pretty easy agreement that a lot of people would have. But 27% of the recipients are above the federal poverty line. Now it goes up to 130% of the federal poverty line, but what's the federal poverty line for? There are arguments against doing that. It's a buffer. You don't want to have a massive cliff. They try to ease people out of it, stuff like that. Some of those people should be cut out. Poverty is poverty. Above the poverty line is above the poverty line. 27% of the people on it are above the poverty line. That's something. You got to stop allowing people to buy every single thing that's at a grocery store. This is to keep people from starving. There's no reason there should be millions and millions of UPC codes that this thing qualifies for. You should go to off-brand products and act like the person who's paying for it is standing next to you when you're picking the thing off the shelf. It's not the case, but it's the same thing. You just should, okay? And there could be other things they could do for paying attention to people's finances, making sure there's not fraud, things like that, making sure people actually need it and not that they just qualify for it, because you could qualify for it and not actually need it. Anything like that, I'm open to suggestions on. Of course, as always, you have to be very careful that you're not adding so much of an administrative cost that you're actually costing more money than you're saving. So you got to be careful when doing those things. Those are just a few of my solutions that I have so far. We're going to get to a little bit more of this stuff tomorrow. I've got some more ideas that I'll talk about tomorrow for Dumb Bleep of the Week, especially when we're playing some of the videos from people. That's my snap rundown that I got right now. In order to actually address the problem, we're going to have to address large chunks of the money. I'm fine with some small chunks. That's fine. but we're going to have to address large chunks if you actually want to solve the problem. Big problem we have, this is a pretty big one. We got over $2 trillion deficit right now. We got $38 trillion in debt, something like that. Social Security is going to run out of money here pretty soon. It's actually going to happen. There will be a fiscal crisis in America's future, and it's going to end up with a lot of inflation. And one thing we have to do is get the deficit down. This is one little tiny portion of it. This is $100 billion, and you're not going to cut out the whole program. Not going to happen. But we were spending $60 billion inflation adjusted in 2019. And I think we ought to be able to get closer to that by doing some of the stuff I mentioned today. If you enjoyed today's show, let me know. At Good AM Liberty on X. Tell a friend, family member, children that they need to listen to Good Morning Liberty every single day of the week when we want to. Missed a couple days this week. Sorry about that. That was my fault. Leave us a rating and review that tells the algorithms that people want to listen to the show. Interact with us on social media and on YouTube. It all just feeds the algorithms. And plus, we want to hear from you. I want to hear, maybe you disagree with something. Maybe you got a better idea than I do. That's certainly possible. I want to know all the things. And so come and interact with us on all of our posts, all of our videos, stuff like that. Join the Fed Haters Club so you can hang out with me and with Charlie every day of the week when we want to. Join gml.com. If you do every single one of the things I just said, and I mean all of them, I'll be back here again tomorrow for Don't Believe of the Week. Until then, have a good day and a good morning, Liberty.